They say humans are weak. Soft flesh, fragile bones, short lives. The Galactic Council classified Earth as a minor threat, barely worth monitoring. They were wrong. When the Zephyrian Empire sent their finest shadow assassins to eliminate humanity's greatest warrior, they expected a quick, clean kill. What they got instead was a reminder of why you should never corner a predator that learned to hunt in Earth's harshest environments. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane didn't just survive the attack. He turned the hunters into the hunted, tracked them across 3-star systems, and delivered their heads to the very throne room where the assassination order was given. This is the story of how one Navy SEAL taught an entire galactic empire that humans don't just fight back, they finish what you start. Welcome to humanity's introduction to the galaxy. It's going to be bloody. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the space station's maintenance corridor, his breathing steady despite the chaos erupting around him. The diplomatic summit on Nexus Station was supposed to be humanity's peaceful introduction to the Galactic Council. Instead, it had become a killing ground. The attack had come during the formal presentation ceremony. Kane had been standing at attention behind Ambassador Chun when the lights flickered. In that split second of darkness, he had heard the whisper of displaced air that every SEAL knew meant incoming death. His training kicked in before his conscious mind could process the threat. He tackled the ambassador to the ground just as energy bolts seared through the space where their heads had been moments before. "Stay down." Kane had hissed to Chun, his hand already moving to the ceremonial sidearm that regulations demanded he carry even to diplomatic functions. The weapon felt inadequate in his grip, but it was better than nothing. The attackers materialized from the shadows like wraiths. Kane's enhanced vision implants, standard issue for all special operations personnel, cut through the artificial darkness they had created. 7 figures moved within human grace, their forms shifting and blurring as advanced stealth technology bent light around their bodies. But technology could only do so much against a predator who had learned to hunt by sound, smell, and instinct. Kane rolled behind a decorative pillar as another volley of energy, fire, scorched the air. The alien weapons made no sound, but he could smell the ozone and feel the heat wash over his position. He counted muzzle flashes, tracked movement patterns, and built a mental map of his enemy's positions in seconds. These weren't random terrorists or pirates. The coordinated assault, the military-grade stealth systems, the precise targeting of key personnel. This was a professional hit squad. Someone wanted the human delegation dead, and they had sent their best to ensure it happened. Ambassador Chen whimpered behind an overturned table, her formal robes torn and bloodied from their dive for cover. Around the reception hall, other delegates screamed and fled in panic. The Altarian trade minister lay motionless near the refreshment stations, purple blood pooling beneath his crystalline carapace. The Centauri economic advisor was crawling toward an exit, leaving a trail of blue ichor from a wound in her thorax. Kane's jaw tightened. These assassins didn't care about collateral damage. They were slaughtering innocents to get to their primary targets. That made them not just enemies, but monsters in his book. The first assassin rounded Kane's pillar with fluid precision, expecting to find a cowering diplomat. Instead, he found 200 pounds of lethal human fury launching forward in a tackle that drove them both to the ground. Kane's combat knife, drawn from its sheath on his dress uniform, punched through the alien's personal shield and into the soft tissue beneath its armored collar. The creature's death throes were silent, but Kane felt its body convulse and go still. He stripped the corpse of its weapon, some kind of plasma rifle with an organic interface that burned his human fingers when he tried to use it. The technology was designed for a different physiology. He tossed it aside and drew his backup pistol from his ankle holster. 6 left, he muttered to himself, falling back into the rhythm that had carried him through dozens of combat operations. Count the enemy. Assess the battlefield. Identify escape routes. Neutralize threats in order of danger. The remaining assassins had regrouped, their formation tightening as they swept through the reception hall with methodical precision. Kane could hear their communication through subsonic frequencies that made his teeth ache. They were coordinating, adapting to the unexpected resistance. That was their mistake. Kane had spent 15 years learning to fight enemies who were stronger, faster, and better equipped than he was. Taliban insurgents with home, field advantage. Cartel sicarios with military-grade weapons. Somali pirates with nothing to lose. He had survived them all by being smarter, more ruthless, and absolutely unwilling to quit. These alien killers were about to learn what that meant. He moved through the chaos like a ghost himself, using the panicking crowd as cover while he repositioned. A draconian delegate stumbled into his path, gasping through his external gills as energy bolts sizzled past them both. Kane grabbed the reptilian ambassador and pulled him behind a structural support beam. "Stay here and keep quiet," Kane whispered. The draconian nodded frantically, his scaled hide shifting colors in fear patterns. Kane spotted his next target, an assassin who had separated from the group to pursue a fleeing Terran journalist. The alien moved with predatory grace, its weapon tracking the human woman as she scrambled toward an emergency exit. Kane couldn't let that happen. He sprinted across open ground, drawing fire from two other assassins as he closed the distance. Energy bolts seared past his head and shoulders, close enough that he could smell his hair singeing. His dress uniform smoldered where a near miss had grazed the fabric. The assassin never saw him coming. Kane's tackle drove the alien into the wall hard enough to crack the reinforced polymer. His knife found a gap in its armor twice before it could recover. The creature dropped its weapon and clutched at Kane's throat with inhuman strength, lifting him off the ground. Kane had fought aliens before during humanity's first contact incidents. He knew they were stronger than humans, faster than humans, more durable than humans. But they weren't more vicious than humans. They hadn't learned to fight dirty in the suburbs of Detroit or the mountains of Afghanistan. Kane's knee came up between the alien's legs with every ounce of strength in his body. Anatomy might be different, but physics was universal. The assassin doubled over, its grip loosening just enough for Kane to break free and drive his knife up under its chin. 5 left. The remaining attackers had abandoned their sweep pattern and were now moving in a tight formation directly toward Kane's position. They had identified him as the primary threat and were adapting their tactics accordingly. Good. That meant they were taking him seriously. It also meant they were making this personal. Kane felt the familiar surge of adrenaline and focus that came when a mission shifted from survival to hunting. These things had come to his house, threatened his people, and tried to kill innocents under his protection. Now, they were going to pay for that mistake. He grabbed the plasma rifle from the second dead assassin and managed to trigger it twice before the organic interface rejected his human nervous system. The shots went wide, but they forced his enemies to dive for cover. More importantly, they told Kane something crucial about his opponents. They could be made to fear. The slight hesitation in their advance, the way they checked their corners more carefully now, the increased spacing between team members. These were all signs that they were no longer certain of victory. They had expected to face soft, diplomatic humans. Instead, they had run into something their intelligence briefings hadn't prepared them for. They had run into a warrior. Kane smiled grimly as he circled around the reception hall's perimeter, using the architectural features and abandoned furniture to break line of sight. He had turned the assassin's advantage against them. Their stealth technology worked both ways. If they couldn't see him clearly, he could use that same visual distortion to mask his own movements. The next assassin died when Kane dropped from the overhead maintenance access he had climbed into during his circuit of the room. 20 feet of fall with 200 pounds of human and combat gear behind it was enough to drive his knife through armor, flesh, and into the deck plating beneath. For left, but they were getting smarter. The survivors had formed a defensive circle in the center of the reception hall, their weapons covering all approaches. Kane could see them scanning for his heat signature, their helmet displays flickering as they adjusted sensor settings. Time for a different approach. Kane made his way to the environmental control panel he had spotted during his initial reconnaissance of the venue. Space stations were delicate ecosystems, dependent on hundreds of interlocking systems to maintain life support. Disable the right components, and you could turn a controlled environment into a weapon. His fingers flew over the control interface, accessing emergency protocols that he had memorized from the station blueprints provided during the security briefing. Atmospheric pressure, temperature control, artificial gravity, lighting systems, all of them could be adjusted with the right access codes. The lights went out first. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the reception hall in hellish red illumination that threw wild shadows across the walls. The assassins' formation tightened as their visual advantage disappeared. Then, Kane killed the gravity. The sudden transition to zero-G sent the surviving assassins tumbling through the air, their careful formation dissolving into chaos. Their weapons tracked wildly as they tried to orient themselves in three-dimensional combat. They were clearly trained for terrestrial operations, not space-based fighting. Kane, on the other hand, had spent months training in orbital facilities. He used handholds and structural elements to control his movement, turning the weightless environment into a three-dimensional hunting ground. He killed the fourth assassin with a knife throw that sent the blade spinning through the air to punch through the alien's faceplate. 3 left, and now they were truly afraid. Kane could see it in the way they moved, hear it in the pitch of their subsonic communication. They had gone from hunters to hunted, and the psychological shift was breaking their tactical discipline. They were making mistakes, taking unnecessary risks, letting emotion override training. Exactly what Kane had been counting on. The fifth assassin tried to reach the main exit, probably hoping to escape and report back to whoever had sent them. Kane intercepted him in the corridor beyond the reception hall, where the artificial gravity was still functioning. Kane sat across from the only living witness to the Nexus Station attack, a Zephyrian trade attaché who had been found hiding in a storage compartment during the cleanup operation. The alien's insectoid features twitched nervously as Kane stared at him with unblinking intensity. 3 days of forensic analysis on the dead assassins had yielded precious little information. Their equipment was military-grade, but untraceable. Their biosignatures had been scrubbed from galactic databases. Even their genetic material had been altered to prevent species identification. But Kane had been interrogating enemy combatants since before humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel. He knew that everyone broke eventually. You just had to find the right pressure point. The plasma burns on your carapace tell an interesting story, Kane said conversationally, gesturing to the scorch marks visible on the Zephyrian shell. Energy weapons discharge. Recent. But you weren't hit by the assassins' guns. Their weapons leave a different pattern. Someone shot you before the attack began. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in Zephyrian physiology. I told your investigators already. I was caught in crossfire. Random shot. Very unfortunate. Kane leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged. Random shots don't leave that kind of scoring pattern. That's a deliberate wound, placed to look like battle damage, but actually designed to establish your cover story. Someone needed you to have a plausible reason for hiding during the attack. The attaché's compound eyes darted toward the door, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. The Valkyrie was a human warship, built to human specifications. Every bulkhead was reinforced polymer designed to contain explosive decompression. Every corridor was a potential choke point that could be sealed at a moment's notice. There was nowhere to run. I am diplomatic personnel, the Zephyrian said, his voice rising in pitch. You cannot hold me indefinitely. The Galactic Council will protest this treatment. Kane smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. The Galactic Council thinks you died in the attack along with 18 other innocent bystanders. As far as official records show, your body was vaporized when the assassins triggered their explosive charges during their retreat attempt. There's nothing left to protest. The lie came easily. In truth, there had been no explosive charges and no retreat attempt. Kane had killed the assassination team to the last individual, eliminating any chance of interrogating them. But the attaché didn't need to know that. You're dead, friend, Kane continued, his tone conversational. Dead people don't have rights under galactic law. They don't get diplomatic protection. They don't get rescue missions. They just get buried in unmarked graves when they've outlived their usefulness. The psychological pressure was working. Kane could see it in the way the alien's respiratory spiracles fluttered, the nervous, grooming gestures it made with its secondary limbs, the way its head crest flushed darker colors. Fear was universal, even across species lines. Now, I can make you officially alive again, Kane said. All it takes is some paperwork and a creative explanation for how you survived what killed everyone else in that storage compartment. But that kind of miracle requires cooperation. The Zephyrian was silent for long minutes. its alien features unreadable to most humans. But Kane had studied xenobiology as part of his special operations training. He knew the signs of an intelligence asset wrestling with conflicting loyalties. "The Empire will know if I betray them," the attaché finally whispered. "They have agents everywhere. Even here, on your ship." Kane's expression didn't change, but internally he filed that information away for later analysis. If the Zephyrians had penetrated human ship security, that represented a massive intelligence failure that would need to be addressed. "What Empire?" Kane asked. "I don't see any Empire here. I see one scared little bug who thought he could play in the big leagues and got in over his head." The insult was calculated. Zephyrians prize their individual worth and status within their complex social hierarchy. Reducing the attaché to an insignificant insect would wound his pride and potentially override his training. "I am Claxthal of the Third Ascending, honored servant of the Eternal Throne." The alien snapped, his pride overriding his caution. "I am no mere insect to be crushed under your primitive boot." Kane nodded as if the outburst confirmed something he had already suspected. "Third Ascending puts you pretty high in the food chain. High enough to know who ordered the hit on Nexus Station. High enough to have access to operational details and strategic objectives." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "High enough to know why the Zephyrian Empire wanted Ambassador Chen dead." Claxthal's compound eyes went wide as he realized he had revealed far more than he intended. His species identification, his rank within Zephyrian society, even his position as an intelligence operative, all of it had spilled out in a moment of wounded pride. "The Empire had nothing to do with this attack," he said quickly, trying to salvage his cover story. "I am merely a trade attaché. I know nothing of military operations." Kane pulled out a data tablet and activated a holographic display. The three-dimensional image showed the molecular structure of the exotic materials found in the assassin's equipment. Zephyrian nanotechnology, specifically the kind used in military stealth systems. "My forensics team found traces of it in the weapon's residue." He swiped to the next display. "Zephyrian biomarkers in the genetic material recovered from the attack site. Your people were very thorough about scrubbing the evidence, but they missed a few cellular fragments embedded in the station's hull plating." Another swipe. "And this is particularly interesting, communications intercepts from the Zephyrian fleet that was conducting training exercises in the Nexus system during the summit. A lot of encrypted traffic just before and after the attack. Traffic that stopped completely once we started our investigation." Kane watched as the aliens' confidence crumbled under the weight of evidence. The Zephyrians had clearly expected their assassination to be attributed to pirates or terrorists, not subjected to the kind of detailed forensic analysis that human military investigators were capable of. "The problem with your people," Kane continued, "is that you think small. One attack, eliminate a few key personnel, destabilize human expansion efforts. Clean and simple. But you didn't account for what happens when humans get angry." He closed the data tablet and locked eyes with the Zephyrian agent. "When humans get angry, we don't just retaliate. We investigate. We analyze. We prepare. And then we make sure that whoever hurt us never gets the chance to do it again." The interrogation continued for 6 more hours. By the end, Kane had a complete picture of the Zephyrian operation. The assassination team had been dispatched by the Imperial Intelligence Division on direct orders from the throne itself. Their mission was to eliminate the human diplomatic delegation and blame the attack on Draconian separatists, hoping to spark a conflict that would keep both species too busy to interfere with Zephyrian expansion plans. It was a clever strategy, the kind of multi-layered deception that the Zephyrian Empire was famous for throughout the galaxy. Unfortunately for them, it required the complete elimination of any witnesses or evidence that could tie the attack back to its true perpetrators. They had failed on both counts. Kane transmitted his findings to Admiral Chun, Ambassador Chen's sister and the commanding officer of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. The response came back within minutes, marked with the highest security classification. "Well done, Commander. Execute Phase 2 immediately. Full operational authority granted." Phase 2. Kane smiled as he read the authorization codes. For 3 days, he had been conducting an investigation. Now he was about to begin a hunt. The Zephyrian agent had provided detailed intelligence on the assassination team's extraction plan. They had been picked up by a stealth corvette operating out of the Kepler Nebula, a vast cloud of gas and stellar debris that provided perfect cover for covert operations. The ship had then rendezvoused with a larger battle group hiding in the nebula's outer layers. More importantly, Claxthal had revealed the location of the operations command structure. The assassination had been coordinated from a mobile command ship called the Revenge of Kythera, flagship of Admiral Vexhai, one of the Zephyrian Empire's most decorated military commanders. That ship, and everyone aboard it, had just become Kane's next target. He made his way to the Valkyrie's armory, where his personal equipment was waiting for him. The dress uniform went into storage, replaced by the matte black combat suit that was his second skin. Ceramic armor plates, environmental seals, enhanced sensor packages, everything he needed for a deep space infiltration mission. Master Chief Riley, the ship's senior NCO, was waiting with Kane's weapons loadout. Stealth insertion package, sir. Minimal electronic signature, maximum stopping power. Kane examined the equipment with professional interest. Monofilament blades that could cut through most armor materials. Electromagnetic pulse grenades designed to disable alien technology. A kinetic rifle loaded with depleted uranium rounds that would punch through starship hulls. What about transport? Kane asked. Ghost-class insertion pod, pre-programmed for the target coordinates. It'll get you into the nebula undetected, but extraction is going to be your problem. The Revenge of Kythera is a battleship, 3,000 crew members, and enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Kane sealed his armor's helmet and ran a systems check. All indicators showed green. Then, I guess I better make sure they don't get a chance to use any of that firepower. The insertion pod was a marvel of human engineering, a stealth capsule designed to deliver special operations teams into hostile territory without detection. It could mimic space debris on sensors, adjust its thermal signature to match background radiation, and slip through even the most sophisticated early warning networks. Kane strapped himself into the pod's crash couch and reviewed his mission parameters one final time. Infiltrate the Revenge of Kythera. Locate and eliminate Admiral Vexhai and his command staff. Gather intelligence on future Zephyrian operations against human interests. Escape if possible, but mission completion was the priority regardless of survival prospects. It was a suicide mission by any reasonable standard. A single human operator against an entire battleship crew. But Kane had been running suicide missions for most of his adult life. The only difference now was that the stakes were measured in stellar coordinates rather than city blocks. The pod's launch was silent and smooth, barely registering as more than a gentle push against Kane's restraints. Within seconds, he was free-falling through space toward the Kepler Nebula, invisible to enemy sensors and committed to a course that would end either in victory or death. He preferred victory, but he was prepared for either outcome. As the pod's navigation system calculated approach vectors and insertion trajectories, Kane closed his eyes and ran through his mission profile one more time. The Zephyrian Empire had made the mistake of targeting humans for elimination. Now, they were going to learn what happened when Earth's finest hunter decided to hunt them back. The galaxy was about to get its first lesson in human warfare doctrine. Hit us once, and we'll hit you back twice as hard. Hit us again, and we'll make sure you never get another chance. Kane smiled in the darkness of his insertion pod as the nebula's swirling gases embraced his approach. The Zephyrians thought they were apex predators. They were about to discover they were wrong. The insertion pod stealth coating absorbed the nebula's radiation as Kane drifted through the swirling gases of the Kepler formation. His sensors painted a three-dimensional picture of the space around him. Vast clouds of ionized hydrogen punctuated by the occasional gravitational anomaly or rogue asteroid. It was perfect hunting ground for predators who preferred to remain unseen. 2 hours into his approach, Kane's passive sensors detected the first signs of the Zephyrian fleet. Energy signatures that didn't match natural phenomena, geometric shadows moving against the nebula's background glow, the subtle gravitational disturbances that indicated large masses under power. The enemy was here, just as his intelligence had suggested. Kane activated his pod's maneuvering thrusters and adjusted his trajectory toward the strongest sensor return. According to the captured data from Claxthal, Admiral Vexhai's flagship would be positioned at the center of the battle group, surrounded by escort vessels and protected by overlapping sensor networks. The Revenge of Kythera appeared on his screens like a predatory beast emerging from hiding. The ship was massive, easily 2 kilometers in length, and armed with enough firepower to reduce a space station to glowing debris in minutes. Its hull was a work of art, flowing organic curves that spoke to the Zephyrian aesthetic of biological perfection. Weapon ports dotted its surface like scales, each one capable of delivering death across interplanetary distances. Kane studied the ship's configuration through his pod's telescopic sensors, memorizing structural details and identifying potential entry points. The Zephyrians favored redundant designs with multiple backup systems, making their ships remarkably difficult to disable from the outside. But that same redundancy created maintenance access points that could be exploited by someone small enough and skilled enough to navigate them. The Ghost Pod's computer identified 17 possible infiltration routes, ranking them by probability of success and strategic value. Kane dismissed most of them immediately, too obvious, too well-defended, or too far from his primary objectives. That left 3 viable options, each with its own risks and advantages. The main docking bay was heavily guarded, but offered direct access to the ship's command levels. The engineering section was less protected, but would require a dangerous journey through the ship's power systems to reach the bridge. The waste processing facility was barely monitored, but would put him in the least advantageous position for completing his mission. Kane chose the engineering route. He had always preferred the direct approach, but this mission required subtlety over speed. Better to infiltrate quietly and strike when his enemies least expected it than to announce his presence with a frontal assault. The pod's automated systems brought him alongside the battleship's massive hull, matching velocity and orientation with mechanical precision. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Kane could see the ship's surface in perfect detail. Armored plates that could withstand nuclear bombardment, sensor arrays that could track objects across light years of space, and point defense systems that could vaporize incoming missiles before they could detonate. None of those systems were designed to detect a single human operator in stealth gear. Kane's cutting tools made short work of the access hatch he had identified in the intelligence briefings. Zephyrian hulls were tough, but not impenetrable, especially when attacked from an unexpected vector. The molecular disruptor beam sliced through the armored plating like a hot knife through butter, creating an opening just large enough for a human to squeeze through. The ship's interior was a maze of organic curves and biomechanical interfaces. Zephyrian technology blended living tissue with advanced machinery, creating ships that were as much organism as vessel. The walls pulsed with a rhythm that matched a massive heartbeat, and the air was thick with pheromones that would have been intoxicating to a Zephyrian nervous system. Kane's environmental suit filtered out the chemical signals and provided him with a sterile atmosphere that wouldn't trigger the ship's biological sensors. To the Revenge of Kythera's security systems, he was just another component, indistinguishable from the thousands of organic subsystems that kept the vessel functioning. His first objective was to locate the ship's command center and identify Admiral Vexhigh's current position. Kane moved through the engineering section like a ghost, avoiding crew members and automated systems with equal skill. The Zephyrians were efficient but predictable, following patrol routes and maintenance schedules that Kane could anticipate and exploit. The ship's internal layout was more complex than human designs, with multiple levels that curved and twisted in 3-dimensional patterns that maximized space utilization. But Kane had studied Zephyrian architecture extensively during his intelligence training. He knew that all their ships followed similar organizational principles, with command functions concentrated in protected core areas and support systems distributed throughout the hull. His first kill came in a secondary power distribution hub, where a lone technician was monitoring plasma flow regulators. The Zephyrian never knew he was there until Kane's monofilament blade separated his head from his shoulders in a single silent stroke. The body was hidden in an access conduit that wouldn't be checked for hours, buying Kane precious time before the alarm was raised. Moving deeper into the ship, Kane began to understand the scope of the operation he was facing. This wasn't just a single battleship on a reconnaissance mission. The Revenge of Kythera was the flagship of an invasion fleet, its holds filled with assault troops and orbital bombardment weapons. Intelligence screens showed targeting data for human colonies, strike plans for Earth's outer system defenses, and contingency orders for the complete annexation of human space. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just planning to eliminate humanity's diplomatic corps. They intended to conquer the entire human sphere, reducing Earth and its colonies to tributary states under imperial rule. The assassination at Nexus Station had been the opening move in a campaign of galactic domination. Kane felt his anger crystallize into something cold and hard. These aliens had made the fundamental mistake of underestimating human resolve. They thought they could pick off humanity's leaders and expect the rest of the species to roll over and submit. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The ship's crew complement was massive. Nearly 3,000 Zephyrians working in shifts to keep the battleship operational around the clock. But Kane had advantages that numbers couldn't counter. He was smaller than the enemy, faster in confined spaces, and trained to exploit exactly the kind of vulnerabilities that large ships inevitably possessed. His second kill was a communications officer who had been working alone in a shielded relay station. Kane disabled the alien with a neural disruptor that left no external signs of violence, then used the officer's access codes to infiltrate the ship's information systems. Within minutes, he had a complete map of the vessel's internal layout and a real-time tracking display showing the location of key personnel. Admiral Vexhai was on the command bridge, directing a tactical exercise that involved the entire battle group. The simulation showed Zephyrian forces conducting a multi-vector assault on Earth's solar system, with particular attention paid to eliminating human space-based defenses before moving against the planet itself. Kane studied the exercise parameters with professional interest. The Zephyrians were good, their tactics were sound, and their execution was precise. But they were also arrogant, assuming that their technological superiority would guarantee victory against primitive human forces. They hadn't accounted for the possibility that humans might adapt their strategies or develop new weapons in response to an alien threat. That arrogance would be their downfall. Kane made his way toward the bridge levels, moving through maintenance corridors and service passages that the ship's crew rarely used. His path took him past weapon storage areas, troop quarters, and tactical planning centers, all potential targets for sabotage operations that could cripple the ship's offensive capabilities. But sabotage wasn't his primary mission. Kane was here to send a message, and messages required a personal touch. The third kill came in a corridor intersection where two security officers were conducting a routine patrol. Kane dropped from an overhead conduit and took them both down before either could raise an alarm. Their weapons joined his growing arsenal. Energy pistols that could punch through most armor, plasma grenades that could clear an entire compartment, and personal shield that would protect him from return fire. He was no longer just infiltrating the enemy ship. He was hunting its crew with predatory efficiency. The fourth and fifth kills happened almost simultaneously when Kane encountered a maintenance team working on the ship's environmental systems. The Zephyrians died quickly and quietly, their bodies concealed in the very systems they had been servicing. By the time their corpses were discovered, Kane would be long gone. Word of the missing crew members began to spread through the ship's communication networks. Kane monitored the security channels through his capture equipment, watching as confusion turned to concern and concern turned to alarm. The crew was beginning to realize that something was hunting them in their own ship. Admiral Vexhai's voice cut through the chatter with military authority. All sections report. I want a complete crew accountability check within the next 10 minutes. Security teams to condition yellow. Begin systematic sweeps of all non-essential areas. Kane smiled behind his helmet's faceplate. The Admiral was reacting exactly as predicted, implementing standard security protocols designed to counter conventional threats. But Kane wasn't a conventional threat. He was a human special operations soldier, trained to fight in environments where the enemy had every advantage except one. Humans were better at killing than anyone else in the galaxy. The security sweeps began in the ship's outer sections and worked their way inward, teams of armed Zephyrians moving in coordinated patterns through corridors and compartments. Kane let them come, using their predictable search patterns to position himself for maximum effectiveness. The sixth kill was a security team leader who had separated from his unit to investigate an anomalous sensor reading. Kane's blade found the gap in the alien's armor with surgical precision, dropping him silently to the deck. The team's communication protocols called for regular check-ins every 5 minutes. Plenty of time for Kane to prepare his next ambush. He rigged the body with an improvised explosive device constructed from stolen plasma grenades and maintenance chemicals. When the dead alien's teammates came looking for their missing leader, they found him propped against a bulkhead with his weapon in his hands. The booby trap detonated as they approached, taking out the entire 4-person security team in a blast that shook the surrounding corridors. Now the hunt was truly beginning. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as damage control teams responded to the explosion. Kane could hear Admiral Vexhi's voice over the communication channels, demanding answers that his crew couldn't provide. How could intruders have penetrated their ship's security? Where had they come from? How many were there? Kane intended to keep them guessing. He moved through the chaos like a force of nature, striking where the enemy was weakest and vanishing before they could respond. Another security team died when their patrol route took them past a concealed position in a storage bay. A group of technicians was eliminated when they responded to a false maintenance alert that Kane had triggered using their own computer systems. Each attack was carefully planned to maximize psychological impact while minimizing Kane's exposure to retaliation. He wanted the crew to know they were being hunted, to feel the fear creeping through their ship like a plague. Terror was a weapon as powerful as any blade or bullet. The Zephyrians began moving in larger groups, abandoning their standard patrol patterns in favor of concentrated sweeps that could provide mutual support. It was a reasonable response to an unknown threat, but it also created larger targets for Kane to exploit. A 6-person security detail died when Kane triggered an explosive device that had been concealed in an air circulation shaft above their position. The blast brought down an entire section of ceiling, crushing the aliens under tons of debris while simultaneously severing power lines that plunged half the deck into darkness. Kane moved through that darkness like he owned it, his enhanced vision turning the emergency lighting into a tactical advantage. He could see the enemy clearly while remaining invisible to their sensors. It was a predator's paradise. By the time Admiral Vexhi ordered a complete lockdown of the ship's internal systems, Kane had eliminated nearly 30 crew members without suffering so much as a scratch. The Revenge of Kythera was beginning to feel like a tomb, its corridors echoing with the sounds of frightened voices and pounding footsteps as the survivors tried to find an enemy who refused to be found. Kane checked his chronometer and calculated the time remaining until he reached the ship's command center. The hunt was proceeding ahead of schedule, but he knew the most dangerous part of the mission was still ahead of him. Admiral Vexhi would be waiting on the bridge, surrounded by his most elite guards and protected by the ship's most sophisticated security systems. Taking down the Admiral would require everything Kane had learned about warfare, strategy, and the art of killing. But first, he had a few more lessons to teach the Zephyrian crew about what happened when they threatened humanity's children. The hunt was just getting started. The command deck of the Revenge of Kythera was a cathedral of military power, its curved walls lined with holographic displays showing the disposition of the entire Zephyrian battle group. Admiral Vexhi stood at the center of it all, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the bioluminescent panels that provided illumination throughout the ship. His compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously, while his subordinates worked frantically to locate the intruder who had been systematically dismantling their crew. Kane observed the bridge from his concealed position in the ceiling's service conduits, counting targets and identifying threats through his enhanced optics. 43 crew members were visible on the command deck, including the Admiral and his senior staff. Security teams had established defensive positions at all the major access points, their weapons trained on the corridors that led to the bridge. They were looking in the wrong direction. Kane had spent the last 6 hours studying the ship's architectural blueprints, memorizing every service tunnel and maintenance passage that connected to the command section. The Zephyrians had designed their vessels with redundant systems and multiple backup routes, a philosophy that prioritized survival over security. That same redundancy had given Kane numerous options for infiltrating the most protected area of the ship. The Admiral's voice carried clearly through the bridge's communication systems as he coordinated the search efforts. Deck 7 reports negative contact. Deck 8 is still conducting sweeps. I want every compartment, every access panel, every ventilation shaft examined with molecular scanners. This intruder will not escape my ship. Kane almost smiled at the alien's confidence. Admiral Vexhai was operating under the assumption that he was dealing with a conventional enemy, perhaps a team of saboteurs or assassins who had somehow bypassed the ship's perimeter defenses. He couldn't conceive of a single operative who could pose a serious threat to a battleship crew of 3,000. That blindness would be his undoing. Kane's first target was the bridge's primary communication array, a biomechanical interface that connected the command center to the rest of the ship. Disabling it would isolate the admiral from his fleet and prevent him from calling for reinforcements when the real fighting began. The communication officer responsible for maintaining the system was a young Zephyrian whose attention was focused entirely on the search reports flooding his station. He never noticed the nearly invisible figure that dropped from the overhead access hatch directly behind his position. Kane's neural disruptor fired once, sending a concentrated electromagnetic pulse through the alien's nervous system. The Zephyrian collapsed without a sound, his vital signs flatlined, but his body showing no external signs of trauma. To casual observation, it would appear that he had simply fallen asleep at his post. Kane's fingers flew over the communication console, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the Zephyrian technology. The organic computer systems resisted his intrusion at first, but human encryption-breaking software was more aggressive than anything the aliens had encountered. Within seconds, Kane had administrative access to the ship's entire communication network. He uploaded a virus of his own design, a piece of malicious code that would spread through the ship's computer systems like a digital cancer. The virus wouldn't destroy the ship's systems immediately, but it would gradually corrupt data files, introduce false sensor readings, and cause seemingly random equipment failures. By the time the crew realized what was happening, their ship would be crippled from within. The second target was the tactical display operator, responsible for maintaining the holographic battle maps that showed the fleet's current disposition. Kane moved through the bridge like a shadow, using the busy crew members and complex equipment arrays to mask his approach. This kill was riskier. The tactical station was positioned near the center of the bridge, where the admiral could observe it directly. Kane would need to eliminate the operator quickly and quietly, without attracting attention from the surrounding personnel. He waited for the perfect moment, timing his approach to coincide with an alarm that sounded from one of the lower decks. As the bridge crew's attention focused on the new emergency report, Kane struck with surgical precision. The monofilament blade slid between the tactical officer's shell plates and severed his spinal cord in a single motion. The Zephyrian died instantly, his body slumping forward over his control station as if he had simply dozed off during his watch. Kane assumed the dead officer's position, his hands moving over the holographic controls as if he belonged there. His stolen uniform and basic knowledge of Zephyrian military protocols allowed him to blend in with the bridge crew, at least temporarily. From his new vantage point, Kane could see the complete tactical picture of the Zephyrian operation. The battle group consisted of 12 capital ships and nearly 40 escort vessels, all positioned to launch a coordinated assault on human space. The fleet's firepower was staggering, enough to reduce Earth's orbital defenses to scrap metal and bombard the planet's surface into submission. But the invasion fleet had a critical weakness that Kane could exploit. Their ships were arranged in a standard formation that maximized mutual support, but also created overlapping sensor shadows. If he could trigger the right sequence of events, he could turn the fleet's own weapons against each other. Kane began subtly altering the tactical displays, introducing minor errors in positional data and communication protocols that would compound over time. The virus he had uploaded was already beginning to affect the ship sensor networks, creating false contacts and phantom signals that would confuse the tactical picture even further. Admiral Vexhai noticed the discrepancies almost immediately. His eyes tracked the tactical displays with predatory intensity, searching for patterns in the sensor data that didn't conform to his expectations. Communications verified the positions of the Sword of Vengeance and the Talon of Righteousness, the Admiral commanded. "I'm seeing conflicting data on their current vectors." Kane responded in perfect Zephyrian military syntax, his vocal implants modulating his voice to match the dead officer's tonal patterns. "Confirming positions now, Admiral." Some interference from a nebula's radiation fields may be affecting our sensor accuracy. It was a plausible explanation for the anomalies Kane was introducing into the system. The Kepler Nebula's exotic matter did interfere with most scanning technologies, making it the perfect cover for electronic warfare operations. While the Admiral's attention was focused on the tactical displays, Kane began his real work. His fingers moved over the communication controls, accessing the ship's internal security network and the personal files of the command staff. He needed to understand the Zephyrian command structure and identify the key personnel who would need to be eliminated to completely disable the invasion fleet. The intelligence he gathered was disturbing. Admiral Vexhai was not just a military commander, but also a political leader within the Zephyrian Empire's ruling council. His death would send shockwaves through the imperial hierarchy and potentially destabilize the government's war plans. More importantly, Kane discovered that the Admiral carried authorization codes for the entire invasion fleet. If he could capture those codes before killing Vexhai, he could turn the Zephyrian ships against each other or potentially redirect them away from human space entirely. But first, he needed to eliminate the bridge's security detail. Kane's third kill was the senior security officer, a veteran warrior whose armor was scarred from dozens of battles across the galaxy. The alien was positioned near the Admiral's command chair, his weapon drawn, and his attention focused on the bridge's access points. Kane approached from the officer's blind spot, using a maintenance cart as cover until he was close enough to strike. The neural disruptor fired twice in rapid succession, overwhelming the Zephyrian's nervous system and dropping him unconscious to the deck. This time, Kane's attack was noticed. A junior security officer spotted his colleague's collapse and immediately raised the alarm. Security breach on the bridge. Officer down. The bridge erupted into chaos as weapons were drawn and personnel scrambled for cover. Admiral Vexhai's voice cut through the confusion with military authority. Lock down all access points. Activate internal defenses. Find that intruder. Kane abandoned his position at the tactical station and rolled behind a bank of computer terminals as energy bolts seared through the air where he had been standing. The bridge's automated defense systems came online, filling the chamber with a deadly crossfire of plasma beams and particle weapons. But the defensive grid was designed to stop conventional attackers, not someone who understood how to exploit its programming. Kane had studied the schematics during his approach to the ship, memorizing the firing patterns and sensor coverage that the automated systems would use. He moved through the defensive fire like a dancer, timing his movements to the microsecond gaps between weapon cycles. Energy bolts scorched the air around him, but none found their target. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as a single human operator navigated their most sophisticated security measures with impossible precision. Kane's fourth kill was the weapons control officer, eliminated with a precisely thrown knife that punched through the alien's faceplate and into his brain. The Zephyrian collapsed over his control station, his dying reflexes triggering random firing solutions that sent the ship's main guns cycling through their targeting sequences. The fifth and sixth kills came almost simultaneously as Kane moved through the bridge's computer terminals, using them as cover while eliminating crew members with surgical precision. Each death was calculated to maximize the psychological impact on the survivors while disrupting the ship's operational effectiveness. Admiral Vexhai drew his personal weapon, a ceremonial plasma sword that crackled with lethal energy. "Face me, human. Let us end this honorably." Kane stepped into view, his own knife gleaming in the bioluminescent lighting. Around them, the surviving bridge crew backed away, creating a clear space for single combat between the two commanders. "You want honor?" Kane asked, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "You sent assassins to murder diplomats. You plan to conquer my species without provocation. There's no honor in any of that." The Admiral's compound eyes glittered with rage. "Your people are weak, suitable only for servitude under Imperial rule. We offered you the chance to submit peacefully. You chose war instead." Kane circled his opponent, studying the alien's stance and movement patterns. Vexhai was a skilled warrior, but his ceremonial armor was designed more for display than combat. More importantly, he was fighting with the techniques of his own species, techniques that assumed he would be facing another Zephyrian opponent. Kane had no such limitations. The fight was brief, and brutal. Admiral Vexhi's plasma sword was a fearsome weapon, capable of cutting through most known materials with ease. But Kane didn't try to block the energy blade. Instead, he used his superior speed and agility to stay outside its range, forcing the Admiral to overextend himself with increasingly desperate attacks. When the opening came, Kane took it. His knife slipped past the Admiral's guard and found the junction between helmet and chest plate. The monofilament edge severed the alien's spinal cord with mechanical precision, dropping the great Admiral Vexhi to the deck of his own flagship. The remaining bridge crew stared in shock as their commander fell. Some raised weapons, others backed toward the exits, and a few simply stood frozen in disbelief. None of them seemed capable of processing what they had just witnessed. Kane ignored them all. He moved to the Admiral's body and retrieved the authorization code from the dying alien's command implant. The encrypted data files contained everything he needed to take control of the Zephyrian fleet: targeting protocols, communication frequencies, and, most importantly, the shutdown commands that could disable every ship in the battle group. "Attention all Zephyrian personnel," Kane announced, his voice broadcasting through the ship's communication system. "Admiral Vexhi is dead. Your invasion fleet is under new management." He activated the Admiral's authorization codes and began transmitting new orders to the surrounding ships. Weapon systems powered down. Navigation computers accepted new course headings that would take the fleet away from human space. Most importantly, the virus Kane had uploaded began executing its final protocols, systematically corrupting the ship's military databases and rendering their tactical information useless. The Zephyrian Empire's carefully planned invasion of human space collapsed in minutes, brought down by a single human operative who had turned their own systems against them. But Kane wasn't finished yet. He had one more message to send, one that would ensure the Zephyrians never again underestimated human capabilities. He activated the ship's long-range communication array and opened a direct channel to the Imperial capital. When the Zephyrian throne answered his call, Kane made sure they got a clear view of their admiral's corpse and the chaos that surrounded the bridge. "This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane of the Earth Defense Forces," he said calmly. "Your invasion fleet has been neutralized. Your admiral is dead. And this is what happens to anyone who threatens my people." He cut the transmission and began preparing for the final phase of his mission. The hunt was almost complete, but Kane still had to escape from the heart of enemy territory with intelligence that could save humanity from future attacks. The hardest part of his mission was just beginning. The Zephyrian Imperial Throne Room was a monument to galactic conquest, its soaring walls lined with the banners of 1,000 subjugated worlds. Emperor Kythak Sul sat upon the eternal throne, his ancient carapace gleaming with biomechanical enhancements that extended his life far beyond natural limits. Around him, the Imperial Council watched the transmission from the Revenge of Kythera with expressions that ranged from shock to outrage to carefully concealed fear. The human's message was still echoing through the chamber when Kane's image flickered and died, leaving the council members staring at a blank holographic display. For several minutes, no one spoke. The implications of what they had witnessed were too enormous to process immediately. Admiral Vexhi was dead. The invasion fleet was compromised. And somewhere in the Kepler Nebula, a single human soldier was making a mockery of 3 centuries of Zephyrian military superiority. "Impossible," whispered General Thekmore, the Empire's senior military advisor. "One primitive cannot have defeated our finest battle group. There must be an entire human fleet hidden in the nebula." Emperor Kythak Sul's compound eyes tracked to the general with predatory intensity. "Our sensors detected no additional ships. Our intelligence operatives reported no unusual human military activity. That primitive accomplished with cunning what an entire fleet could not achieve through force." The Emperor's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, but underneath his calm exterior, Kane could sense the fury building. The transmission had been broadcast on open channels, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would learn of the Zephyrian Empire's humiliation. The political consequences would be devastating. But Kane wasn't finished humiliating his enemies yet. The escape from the Revenge of Kythera had taken 18 hours of careful navigation through the ship's compromised systems. Kane had used the chaos following Admiral Vexhi's death to access restricted areas and gather additional intelligence on the Empire's military capabilities. The data he had collected would be invaluable for preparing Earth's defenses against future attacks. More importantly, he had learned something that changed the entire strategic picture of the conflict. The Zephyrian Empire was not as strong as it appeared. Their military expansion had outpaced their logistical capabilities, creating supply shortages and morale problems throughout the Imperial fleet. Several subject species were showing signs of rebellion, and the Empire's political structure was more fragile than their propaganda suggested. Kane had exploited those weaknesses during his escape, triggering a cascade of system failures that left the revenge of Kythera dead in space. The virus he had uploaded had spread to other ships in the fleet, corrupting their databases and forcing them to return to Imperial space for extensive repairs. The invasion of human space had been postponed indefinitely, possibly forever. But Kane's mission was not complete. He had eliminated the immediate threat to humanity, but the Empire itself remained. As long as the Zephyrians viewed humans as potential slaves rather than equals, there would be other attempts at conquest. The only way to ensure lasting peace was to make the Empire understand that attacking humanity carried consequences they could not afford to pay. That meant taking the war directly to the Imperial capital. Kane's stolen Zephyrian scout ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr Prime system, its stealth systems masking its approach from the orbital defense networks that protected the Empire's homeworld. The planet below was a jewel of biomechanical engineering, its surface covered with living cities that pulsed with organic light. Billions of Zephyrians called it home, including the Emperor and his ruling council. It was also the most heavily defended system in known space, protected by orbital fortresses that could shatter battleships and patrol fleets that numbered in the hundreds. No enemy force had ever penetrated the system's defenses. No one had ever attacked the Imperial capital. Kane intended to be the first. The scout ship's sensors painted a tactical picture of the system's defenses, identifying patrol routes and weapon positions with mechanical precision. The Zephyrians had learned from their defeat at Kepler Nebula. Security protocols had been updated and alert levels raised throughout the Empire. They were expecting retaliation. They were not expecting a single infiltrator to slip past their defenses and strike at the heart of their government. Kane guided the scout ship through the outer system, using gravity wells and asteroid fields to mask his approach. The Zephyrian identification codes he had stolen from the Revenge of Kythera allowed him to pass through several security checkpoints without challenge. To the orbital defense networks, he was just another Imperial vessel returning from patrol duty. The landing site Kane chose was a maintenance facility on one of the capital's outer moons, far enough from Zephyr Prime to avoid detection, but close enough to allow rapid transit to the planet's surface. The facility was lightly guarded, just a skeleton crew of technicians and security personnel who were more concerned with equipment maintenance than external threats. Kane eliminated the guards with silent efficiency, his weapons making no sound as they claimed their victims. Within minutes, he had control of the facility and access to its transport systems. The maintenance crews never knew what hit them. The cargo hauler that carried Kane to Zephyr Prime's surface was automated, its holds filled with industrial equipment destined for the capital's manufacturing districts. Kane rode in the cargo bay, surrounded by containers of rare metals and biomechanical components while the ship's computer navigated through atmospheric traffic control. The capital city of eternal glory spread out below him like a living organism, its structures pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed information in the Zephyrian visual language. Millions of beings moved through its streets and airways, going about their daily lives in blissful ignorance of the war that their government had provoked. Kane felt no sympathy for them. They had chosen their leaders, supported their empire's expansion, and celebrated the conquest of other species. They bore responsibility for the actions taken in their name. The cargo hauler's destination was a processing facility in the city's industrial sector, only 12 kilometers from the Imperial Palace complex. Kane disembarked during the unloading process, slipping away from the transport hub and into the city's underground infrastructure. Zephyr Prime's sewage and utility systems were marvels of biomechanical engineering, living tunnels that processed waste and distributed resources throughout the urban sprawl. They were also completely unguarded, considered too distasteful for proper Zephyrian citizens to monitor effectively. Kane made his way through the underground network with practiced ease, following maintenance maps he had memorized during his approach to the planet. The tunnels connected every major building in the capital, including the Imperial Palace itself. Within hours, he was directly beneath the seat of galactic power. The first security checkpoint he encountered was staffed by elite Imperial guards, warriors whose armor incorporated the finest technology the Empire could produce. Their weapons could punch through starship hulls, and their enhanced reflexes were fast enough to track supersonic projectiles. They died before they knew they were under attack. Kane's assault on the palace began with the guards' own security systems, turning their scanners and alarm networks against them. The virus programs he uploaded created false contacts and phantom intruders, sending security teams racing toward empty corridors while he moved through areas they had already cleared. The palace's interior was a maze of ceremonial chambers and administrative offices, all designed to showcase the Empire's power and wealth. Trophies from conquered worlds lined the walls, and the floors were inlaid with precious metals stripped from the corpses of dead civilizations. Kane added his own decorations to the display. The bodies of Imperial guards began appearing throughout the palace, each one positioned to send a specific message. Some were found in poses of supplication before the trophies of their victims. Others were arranged to spell out words in the human alphabet, words that promised retribution for the Empire's crimes. By the time the palace's security chief realized what was happening, Kane had eliminated nearly 50 guards and penetrated to the throne room's outer chambers. Alarms wailed throughout the complex as emergency protocols locked down critical areas and summoned reinforcements from across the capital. But Kane was already inside their perimeter, moving through passages that were supposed to be impregnable. The Empire's greatest fortress had become a trap for its own defenders. Emperor Kaithak waited in the throne room with his personal guard, ancient warriors who had served the imperial family for centuries. Their weapons were relics of forgotten wars, powered by technologies that predated most galactic civilizations. They had never known defeat. Kane entered through a ventilation grate high above the throne, dropping into the chamber like an avatar of death. His weapons were already firing as he fell, energy bolts and kinetic rounds finding their targets with inhuman precision. The ancient guards fought with skill and courage, but they were facing an enemy unlike anything in their experience. Kane moved through their formation like liquid violence, never staying in one position long enough for them to target him effectively. The battle lasted 3 minutes and 17 seconds. When it was over, Kane stood alone in the throne room with the bodies of the Empire's finest warriors scattered around him like broken dolls. Emperor Kaithak remained on his throne, his biomechanical enhancements keeping him alive despite wounds that would have killed a normal Zephyrian. His compound eyes tracked Kane's approach with unwavering intensity. "You have come far from your primitive world, human," the Emperor said, his voice carrying centuries of absolute authority. "But you are still only one against billions. Kill me, and 10,000 fleets will reduce your species to ash." Kane stopped directly before the throne, close enough to strike, but making no aggressive moves. "Your fleets couldn't stop one human soldier from walking into your palace and killing your guards. What makes you think they could conquer my entire species?" The Emperor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Arrogance. You think this small victory proves your superiority. You understand nothing of the Empire's true power." Kane reached into his equipment pack and withdrew a data crystal, one of dozens he had prepared during his infiltration of the palace's computer systems. "I understand enough. I know about the rebellion on Altair 7. I know about the supply shortages in the Outer Rim. I know about the political factions that want to replace you." He set the crystal on the throne's armrest, close enough for the Emperor to examine it. "That crystal contains every piece of classified intelligence I've gathered about your Empire's weaknesses. Fleet positions, supply routes, political vulnerabilities, everything my people need to tear your government apart from the inside." The Emperor's eyes focused on the data crystal with horrified fascination. "You would not dare distribute such information. The chaos it would cause would end your Empire's ability to threaten other species," Kane finished, "including mine. The question is whether you're smart enough to prevent that from happening." Kane activated his personal communicator and opened a channel to Earth Command. Admiral Chen's voice answered immediately, transmitted across thousands of light-years of space through quantum entanglement communicators. Status report, Commander. Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Emperor and I are having a conversation about the future of human-Zephyrian relations. I think he's ready to listen to our terms. Kane looked directly into the Emperor's compound eyes as he delivered humanity's ultimatum. The Zephyrian Empire will withdraw all military forces from human space. You will publicly acknowledge humanity as a sovereign species with full rights under galactic law, and you will provide reparations for the lives lost during your assassination attempt. And if we refuse, the Emperor asked. Kane smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Then, I distribute that intelligence to every rebel group and enemy faction your empire has ever created. By the time they finish fighting over the pieces, there won't be an empire left to threaten anyone. The Emperor stared at the data crystal for long minutes, calculating the political consequences of either choice. Finally, he reached out and picked up the crystal, his ancient fingers trembling with rage and humiliation. The Empire agrees to your terms, human. But know that this is not over. Someday, when you least expect it, we will return to finish what we started. Kane shook his head slowly. No, you won't. Because now you know what happens when you threaten humanity. We don't just fight back. We hunt down everyone responsible and make them pay for their mistakes. He activated his personal teleporter, the technology salvaged from the scout ship and modified for individual use. Remember that lesson, Emperor, and make sure you teach it to your successors. The last thing Emperor Kythak Sul saw before Kane vanished was the human's cold smile and the promise of future retribution in his eyes. The data crystal remained on the throne's armrest, a reminder of how completely the Empire's security had been compromised by a single determined enemy. Hours later, as Kane's signal was detected by human ships waiting at the edge of the system, the Emperor's formal surrender was broadcast throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire's expansion was over. Their threat to humanity had been neutralized, and across 1,000 worlds, other species looked up at the stars and wondered what kind of warriors had emerged from the small blue planet called Earth. They would learn soon enough. The age of human expansion was just beginning, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ain activated his personal communicator and opened a channel to Earth Command. This is Lieutenant Commander Kane. Nexus Station is secure. Requesting immediate extraction and forensic analysis of hostile remains. The voice that answered was crisp and professional. Copy that, Commander. Extraction team is en route. What's your status? Kane looked around the command center, taking in the carnage that surrounded him. 7 of the galaxy's finest assassins lay dead at his feet. Not one of them had managed to complete their mission or escape to report back to their masters. Mission accomplished, he said simply. But I think we're going to need a new diplomatic strategy. As he waited for the extraction team to arrive, Kane began planning his next move. Someone had sent these killers, and that someone was going to answer for it. The age of humanity's peaceful expansion into the galaxy was over before it had truly begun. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humans did to those who threatened their own.